is and how.
Yes.
I mean, there aren't any new tricks. These tricks have evolved over.
And
over
one could add
years.
the production of bogus special effects as well, which is
Yeah.
one of the things that completely convicts religion of being fraudulent.
Right.
The belief in the miraculous. The same people will say, well, Einstein felt a spiritual force in the universe, when he said the whole point about it is there are no miracles. There are no changes in the natural order. That's the miraculous thing. They're completely cynical about claiming him.
Well, the other thing worth pointing out
almost the same breath
is that every religious person feels the same criticism of other people's faith that we do as atheists. I mean, they reject the pseudo-miracles and the pseudo-claims to certainty of others. And they see the confidence tricks in other people's faith. And they see it rather readily. You know, every Christian knows the Quran can't be the perfect word of the Creator of the universe, and anyone who thinks it is hasn't read it closely enough, and it's just in this hermetically sealed discourse that isn't really being self-critical. And I think we're on very strong. We make a very strong case when we point that out, and point out also that whatever people are experiencing in church or in prayer, no matter how positive, the fact that Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and Christians are all experiencing it proves that it can't be a matter of the divinity of Jesus or the unique sanctity of the Quran, or because
there's 17 different ways of getting there. Yeah.
By the way, on that, a tiny point. It's not. I hope not a digression. It's useful bearing that in mind too when you get, as I did this morning on ABC News, the question. Well, wouldn't you say religion did some good in the world? I mean, there were good people. You never don't get that argument. And by the way, there's no reason why one shouldn't. We say, well, yes, I have indeed heard it said that Hamas provides social services in Gaza. And I've even heard it said that Louis Farrakhan's group gets young black men in prison off drugs. I don't know if it's true. I'm willing to accept it might be.
Right.
It doesn't alter the fact that the one is a militarized terrorist organization with a fanatical anti-Semitic ideology, and the second is a racist crackpot cult.
Yeah. And the other
I have no doubt that Scientology gets people off drugs too. But my insistence always with these people is if you will claim it for one, you must accept it for them all.
And the other move you can make there,
because if you don't, it's flat out dishonest.
You can invent an ideology which, by your mere invention in that moment, is obviously untrue, which would be quite useful if propagated to billions. I mean,
That's right.
You could say, this is my new religion. Teach people to demand that your children study science and math and economics and all of our terrestrial disciplines to the best of their abilities. And if they don't persist in those efforts, they'll be tortured after death by 17 demons. This would be extremely useful, and it would be far more useful than Islam, propagated to billions. And yet, what are the chances that the 17 demons exist? Zero.
There's a slipperiness too, isn't there, about one way of speaking to sophisticated intellectuals and theologians, and another way of speaking to congregations, and above all, children. And I think we've all of us been accused of going after the easy targets of the Jerry Falwells of this world and ignoring the sophisticated professors of theology. And I mean, I don't know what you feel about that, but one of the things I feel is that the sophisticated professors of theology will say one thing to each other and to intellectuals generally, but will say something totally different to a congregation. They'll talk about miracles, they'll talk about...
Well, they won't talk to a congregation.
Well, archbishops will.
Yes, but when the sophisticated theologians try to talk to the preachers won't have any of it.
Well, that's true.
I mean, you got to realize that sophisticated theology is like stamp collecting. It's a very specialized thing, and only a few people do it.
And a negligible influence.
They take in their own laundry, and they get all excited about some very arcane details, and their own religions pay almost no attention to what they're saying. A little bit of it does, of course, filter in, but it always gets beefed up again for general consumption, because what they say in their writings, at least from my experience, is eye-glazing, mind-twisting, very subtle things which have no particular bearing on life.
Oh, no, I must insist. I must say a good word here for Professor Alistair McGrath, who in his attack on Richard said it's not true, as we've always been told, and most Christians believe, that Tertullian said, credo quae absurdum, quia absurdum, I believe it because it's ridiculous. No, it turns out, I've checked this now, though I don't know this from McGrath, that in fact, Tertullian said, the impossibility of it is the thing that makes it the most believable. That's a well distinction, I think. And very useful for training one's mind.
Impossibility as opposed to absurdity?
Very useful for training one's mind in the fine points. It's the likelihood, in other words, that it could have been made up is diminished by the incredibility of it. Who would try and invent something that was that
it's so
unbelievable?
off the wall.
You make some very good points
that actually is,
That's a good
I
point.
think, a debate perfectly well worth having. What I say to these people is this: you're sending your email or your letter to the wrong address. Everyone says, let's not judge religion by its fundamentalists. All right. Take the Church of England. Two of whose senior leaders recently said that the floods in North Yorkshire were the result of homosexual behaviour. Not in North Yorkshire, presumably, but probably in London, I think they're thinking. But
God's aim is a little
one
off.
One of these, the Bishop of Carlisle, is apparently about to be the next Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, this is extraordinary. This is supposed to be the mild and reflective and thoughtful and rather, troubled church, making fanatical pronouncements. Well, I want to hear what Alistair McGrath is going to write to the Bishop of Carlisle, not to me. Is he going to say, my Lord Bishop, do you not realize what a complete idiot you're making of yourself and of our church? Did he do this? If he did it in private, I'm not impressed. He has to say it in public.
The Bishop
Why are
of
they
Carlisle
telling me
backtracked.
I will judge the church by the statements of its bishops, and I think I'm allowed to.
Yeah. But the other thing is that, never mind about the academic theologians, bishops and vicars, who will attack us for taking scriptures, or for accusing people of taking scriptures literally. And of course we don't believe the book of Genesis literally. And yet they do preach about what Adam and Eve did, as though they did exist, as though there's somehow, it's a sort of license to talk about things which they know, and anybody of any sophistication knows, is fiction. And yet they will treat their congregations, their sheep, as though they did exist, as though they were factual. And a huge number of those congregations actually think they did exist.
Can you imagine any one of these preachers saying, as such a topic is introduced, this is a sort of theoretical fiction. It's not true, but it's a very fine metaphor. No, they're just
They
not
kind of,
going.
after the fact, imply that that's what they they expect you to know.
Yes, but they would never announce it. They would
Well,
never
there's
say
another
it.
point there, is that they never admit how they have come to stop taking it literally. Because you have all these people criticizing us for our crass literalism, we're as fundamentalist as the fundamentalists. And yet these moderates don't admit how they have come to be moderate. What does moderation consist of? It consists of having lost faith in all of these propositions, or half of them, because of just the hammer blows of science and secular politics.
Of the
and
crass
rationality.
literalism of the critics.
Yeah,
Yes,
religion has lost its mandate on 1,000 questions, and moderates tend to argue that this is somehow a triumph of faith, that faith is somehow self-enlightening, whereas it's been enlightened from the outside. It has been, it has been intruded upon by
On
science.
that point that I was wanting to raise myself about our own so-called fundamentalism. There's a cleric in Southwark, the first person I saw attacking you and I in print as being just as fundamentalist as those who blew up the London Underground. Do you remember his name?
I don't remember his name.
I'm sorry, I don't remember. He's a very senior Anglican cleric in the Diocese of Southwark. I went on the BBC with him. Just entre parenthèses, I'll say, when I said, how can you call your congregation a flock? Doesn't that say everything about your religion, that you think they're sheep? He said, well, actually, I used to be a pastor in New Guinea, where there aren't any sheep. Well, of course, there are a lot of places where there are no sheep. Gospel's quite hard to teach as a result. We found out what the most important animal to the locals was, and I remember very well my local bishop rising to ask the Divine One to behold these swine, his new congregation. But this is the man who deliberately does a thing like that, that's as cynical as you could wish,